Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are exploring one of the absolute most chilling dark fantasy worlds I've ever come across. We're looking at the lore and the monsters of Tanalon from Arkest and Shadows. And as you'll see pretty quickly, the creatures here aren't just your typical fantasy obstacles to hack through. They are living, breathing embodiments of the world's rot. I've got to be honest, digging into this deep lore left me genuinely a little unsettled. Just let that sink in for a second. No eyes, no mouths until they opened. Wide, unnatural slits filled with rows of needle teeth. Before we even start categorizing these beasts, we really have to wrap our heads around the tone of this universe. The monsters in this lore don't just kill you. They are fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. They're visceral nightmares ripped straight from the void, designed to literally make your skin crawl before they even strike.
So that begs the question, right? What horrors actually lurk in the shadows of Arkest, down in the Undercity, or out in those cursed mists? To understand this, we're going to treat this lore almost like a dark fantasy survival guide. Together, we're going to investigate the anatomy, the origins, and the specific fatal threat level of each creature, just to see exactly what makes them so formidable.
And the thing is, we aren't just observing these monsters from some safe academic distance. No way. We are unpacking the mechanics and the lore of these horrific creatures strictly through the blood-soaked experiences of the Grim Shadows. If you don't know, they are an elite, legendary mercenary company. These are hardened killers who hunt in the dark. It's wild to think about, but if a monster can make a Grim Shadow hesitate, you know for sure it's something truly apocalyptic.
To really kick things off, let's start by looking at how the dark forces of this world physically warp and weaponize humanity itself. It's essentially the world's rot in action.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how perfectly we can contrast two very different types of human-derived monstrosities. On one hand, we have the Enders. These things originate from the tainted waters and the corruptive fogs of the Mistfall region. They are brutal, physical powerhouses. We're talking ogre-sized, plastered in bone charms and blood runes, just hacking away at people with rusted cleavers. But then, compare that to the cultist mutations. Driven by void magic and their worship of the worm, their corruption is completely unnatural. Occultist flesh literally turns into liquid void stuff in writhing tendrils. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they lose their physical form entirely. Instead of brute force, they use devastating magic and literally unravel into dork fire when they die. Both of these were once human, but their corruptions manifest in completely different, terrifying ways.
Let's focus on the Enders for a second, because their lore is exceptionally grim. These half-human, half-horror abominations are so devastating that ancient prophecies literally name them as the bringers of the world's end. But here's the detail that completely caught me off guard. The Grim Shadows are strictly taught never, ever to run from them in the mist. Why? Because the Enders can literally smell fear. If you break formation and run, you're already dead. They don't just fight you, they test their prey, feeding on the absolute terror of the moment.
All right, so if corrupted humans are that bad, you might be wondering about the purely otherworldly threats. Well, as you're about to see, they are so much worse. Let's shift our focus to the alien, void-born creatures.
Here we have the anatomy of a Voidstalker, and walking through this taxonomy trait by trait is just horrifying. First of all, these things are massive, nearly 7 feet tall with pitch-black, slick, mucus-covered skin, and their proportions, completely unnatural. Their arms are way too long, and their knees bend backward like a spider's. Think about why that matters biologically. Those backward joints allow for incredibly erratic, unpredictable leaping. It makes them nearly impossible to track and combat. They attack with sideways slit mouths packed with clicking needle teeth. And as if the standard stalker wasn't bad enough, the lore reveals variants with mouths ripped open across their chests that vomit sizzling acid. There are even bloated, scuttling variants carrying glowing, pulsing egg sacs right on their backs. They are flawlessly, perfectly designed for slaughter. This line perfectly captures the essence of the Voidborn. They weren't just dangerous. They didn't belong in the world. They were wrong. See, encounters with a Voidstalker induce an immediate, visceral, psychological terror, simply because your brain fundamentally rejects them. They aren't natural predators. They are a walking, screeching glitch in reality, an absolute affront to the natural laws of existence. But then, the threat escalates even further. We move on to monsters that don't just tear your flesh, but actively steal your life and your memories. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific nature of the Voidborn doppelganger. We see this firsthand in the lore through Melric, the leader of the Grim Shadows. Think of the human Conway, Malric's old blood brother, a loyal squadmate, a loving father and husband. Then look at the doppelganger. It is a perfect physical mimic, down to the exact facial scar and vocal twitches. But it uses Conway's own memories to weaponize psychology. It casually and sadistically reveals to Malric how it forced Conway's wife to choose which of her daughters it would eat first. I mean, imagine being forced to fight your best friend's memories. It's a level of sociopathic cruelty that proves the Voidborn aren't just mindless beasts. They possess a sickening, calculated malice. Before we hit the absolute climax of our deep dive here, let's take a quick detour and look at the native fauna of the underground. Because in Tanalon, even the literal beasts of burden are absolute nightmares. Deep beneath the surface, down in the obsidian realm of Talzereth, Clan Darkashul, the Dark Elves, they don't ride horses. Nope, they ride blind war lizards. These are massive, scaled horrors clad in jagged metal plate and bone helms. The Dark Elven Knights use these terrifying sightless predators to patrol the chained columns of surface slaves that are dragged down into the screaming pits. It really just goes to show how pervasive the darkness is in this lore. Literally every single layer of this ecosystem is designed for suffering. Okay, we've arrived. This is it. Let's do a deep dive into the absolute most horrifying creatures encountered in the Mistfall ruins. They are referred to in the lore as the Children of the Ceiling, but honestly, let's just call them what they are. The Hoods. I want you to put yourself in this scenario for a second. Imagine looking up into the pitch-black ceiling of an ancient, echoing temple, only to realize the ceiling is made of thousands of giant, unblinking eyes. And then, suddenly, these creatures detach, shaped like a black shroud, wide at the bottom, narrow at the top, and bordered by a ring of huge eyes. They float downward as silently as falling ash. Once they land on a victim's head, they possess them, reanimating the host while retaining all of their deadly combat skills. It's terrifying. If you ever find yourself in Mistfall, consider this your urgent survival guide. So the absolute crucial point here is step number 3. Do not attack the reanimated host's body. When I was first reading this part of the lore, it completely blew my mind. You can run a sword clean through the chest of a possessed mercenary and they will just keep coming at you. It's completely useless. To instantly kill the parasite and drop the host, you have to execute step 4 and pierce the hood itself. Pop the hood, and the nightmare ends. But if you failed to dodge one, the biological mechanics are just deeply, deeply unsettling. A thick glue-like liquid, or maybe acid, began to bubble from the seal where the hood fused with his flesh. The hood literally melts into the victim's skull. It's this rapid acid fusion that shatters bone and binds the parasite to the nervous system in seconds. It is a horrific physical toll that leaves the victim's mouth stretched wide in a silent scream while their own body actively turns against their friends. Let's pull back for a second and see how this all builds together. Because how do you survive when everything is a symptom of something so much worse? Every single creature we've looked at today is connected. They aren't just random wandering monster encounters. They are all tied to an overarching apocalyptic narrative that threatens the entire world of Tanalon. And all of it stems from this: the worm. Whether it's the Voidstalkers leaping out of the Undercity sewers, the sadistic doppelgangers stealing lives, or the cultists unraveling into dark fire, they are all merely symptoms. They're just the heralds of this massive, stirring, godlike entity known as the worm. The cultists call it the coming tide. It is a world-ending force birthing an endless army of void creatures from deep beneath the city's bones. Which leaves us with one final, grim question to ponder. We've seen just how lethal the Grim Shadows are. We know what they're capable of. But when the worm finally awakens in full, and the void breaks completely open, will humanity's darkest blades truly be enough to stop the tide? Or is the world of Tanalon already dead, just waiting for the monsters to finish the job? Keep that thought with you next time you find yourself wandering in the dark.